Episode 1.
So, folks, this is the Lost in His Own Museum podcast, and this is Twig.
And this is Jim.
We're a couple of movie buffs, and we spend most of our time when we're together chatting about movies.
Yeah, so we figured, if we're going to be talking about movies all the time anyway, we might as well record it, because we do come up with some pretty funny stuff.
Yeah, from time to time, yeah. We have a laugh, come up with some theories about stuff, and try and analyse why filmmakers made certain choices, and just see where the conversation takes us. And we thought we'd set a couple of mics up and see whether it relates to the podcast format.
Might as well give it a go.
Absolutely.
So we have just watched Mank, which is David Fincher's new movie.
It is.
Based around the making of Citizen Kane, which I just watched for the first time this week.
Yeah, I've not seen Citizen Kane before. I know the story, and it's one of those I'm ashamed to say that I've not actually watched yet. But I found this film really interesting, and Fincher's my favourite director. It was sort of a bit of a toss-up between him and Nolan.
Yeah.
And do you know what? Tenet sealed it for me.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, I saw Tenet and did like it, but not as much as I've liked David Fincher's, latest work. Gone Girl was fantastic.
Oh, Gone Girl was amazing. That's one of my favourite films.
Did you see Mindhunter? The series that he did.
Astonishing, yeah.
And I know he only directed some episodes, but obviously he was the creative control on that. Absolutely fantastic. So yeah, Fincher took the top spot. So when obviously this was announced, straight away wanted to watch it.
I think Christopher Nolan's still my favourite director, but I really enjoyed Tenet. But after seeing Mank, I'm a little bit on the fence with it now, because it's David Fincher's incredible. I mean, some of his sort of signature techniques of using certain types of camera shots, and and it goes deeper than just little bits and pieces that become a habit of a director. It's like a real kind of big stylistic sort of choice with it. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, we said while watching it, you knew that you were watching a David Fincher movie.
Yeah. But
there weren't necessarily I can't Nolan has his big sort of whoms and has all that sort of stuff going on in the soundtrack, doesn't he? And there's recurring actors and stuff. And I mean, there's obviously recurring actors and collaborators with David Fincher as there is with any and all directors as well. But you knew you were watching a Fincher movie, but it's completely different to anything that you've seen him do before.
Yeah, this one was really different, because I mean, it was because it was based around the making of Citizen Kane, and trying to sort of imitate that style of film. Not imitate. Sorry, that's the wrong word. Not imitate. Sort of it's sort of like an homage to that style of filmmaking.
Yeah, and it was sort of like you say, an homage to that sort of that style of film. But filmed as though somebody was following these people that Herman Mankiewicz, who wrote Citizen Kane, and Orson Welles, and all the other players in the movie. It was like there was the fly on the wall following them around with the camera, and it was it made as though it would have been shot there and then if a documentary crew had followed them around, sort of thing. Yeah,
it's a really interesting story as well, because it's not just a story about how it was made. It's the story about how Herman Mankiewicz became associated with Orson Welles, and
basically how he ended his career.
Yeah, and apart from that, it's kind of the story of the things that Herman Mankiewicz based the story on as well. So some of the characters that he took inspiration for the characters in Citizen Kane, and because obviously Citizen Kane's kind of like quasi biographical anyway.
Yeah, it's sort of based on, amongst others, isn't it, William Randolph Hearst, who Charles Dance plays in this.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that. I love Charles Dance.
Brilliant, wasn't it? Yeah. And obviously then Amanda Seyfried plays. Is it Marion Davis she plays?
It's Marion Davis.
And she's his sort of love interest. And I didn't clock on to that at first, when she was calling him Pops, I was like, that's his dad, because obviously the age different. No. They were together. But
it's just some very creepy, late 1930s sort of weird relationship status things happening.
Absolutely. But it was brilliant. Everybody did a really, really great job in it. But yeah, back to your point. Obviously, it's Citizen Kane is inspired by all these people, and it kind of takes the flashback narrative sort of thing. So we start the film off as he's writing Citizen Kane. Mankiewicz has been involved in a car crash, and he's laid up, broken both his legs. And they agreed to make this picture with Orson Welles, who's sort of like the hot young new star at the time. and they get given a ridiculous deadline, but Mank says that he can do it and write the film in 60 days.
Yeah, in bed, like whilst heavily medicated and drinking heavily and.
Absolutely, and just really everything is against him.
Yeah.
But he dictates this story, which like Phil's already said, is very much sort of taken from snippets of his own life, and then we start to go into flashback territory and sort of flash between the present, which is I think 1939 to 1941ish.
Yeah, I think it goes quite a bit before. It's like 1930.
Well, I was
starts around 34, doesn't it? And then like
what I'm sort of saying is the present day narrative is that sort of thing, and then like I say, it goes back to the early 30s and sort of flashes back, and there's some absolutely fantastic scenes in it as well. And it's one where we don't really want to talk too much about the ins and outs of the plot because
spoilers and stuff.
I'm going to say spoilers, but it's also public knowledge. The film's 80 years old at this point. And it's one of those things where also Citizen Kane's 80 years old at this point, and I think you should just watch it to enjoy it. So we're not going to get too heavy on the plot.
Yeah, what I was really impressed with was the soundtrack.
It was fantastic,
absolutely amazing. I mean, because it's Trent Reznor. He's worked with David Fincher a few times, on Social Network, and
I think he did Gone Girl. Didn't he
Gone Girl as well. Yeah, I mean, I was just saying to JT earlier on, like, when you think about him being the guy that who made Marilyn Manson famous, it's incredible to see his career sort of start to take shape like this in film music. And
do you know what impressed me the most? Because obviously knowing Trent Reznor and knowing his catalogue and the style of music that he normally plays, I thought it was really just a showcase of how talented the guy is.
Yeah.
He's recorded that. None of it was software instruments. I actually looked this up during the film because the score was sublime. And it's all instruments that would have been available at the time. So not only have they recorded on real instruments rather than using maybe software-based instruments as he's done for like electronic scores and things and synthetic stuff, but they've used instruments that would have been available in the 30s and 40s rather than doing it on modern instruments, and it sounded amazing.
Yeah, like tonally and in terms of harmony, we're both musicians, so like, it's talking shop a little bit for us, but it's very it's very reminiscent of the sort of stuff that you used to get, like the film scores of the sort of the 1930s to 1950s, that really heavy string sound and like really big big brass section and kind of that badly mixed and quite rough around the edges.
It was, wasn't it? And we talked
all
about
recorded in one room, sort of with one mic sort of job,
We talked about the dubbing as well, didn't we? Like like it's the ADR, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's sort of done. It's done deliberately, not badly, but like.
Not as polished as a modern film would be.
Yeah.
And the sort of like the post production that's been put on the sound is fantastic. There's scenes where Gary Oldman's talking, and he's not as near to the camera as he would be, and so the audio's got that sort of muffled and sort of lose the quality of it because he's not as near to essentially the microphone that would be held over the camera sort of thing.
Yeah.
And how they've done that after the fact is brilliant. I'm sure as well, I'd need to look it up, but I'm sure that obviously as well as, sort of using digital and modern technology and then sort of making it look dated, I'm sure that they've used some old tech in there as well.
Oh, I would think so. Yeah, I mean...
There were some scenes that really just looked like they couldn't have been...
Yeah. It feels very authentic, and I think it's meant to look authentic, and when you're dealing with somebody like David Fincher, he's going to want it to be like as authentic as possible. He's going to want to make... to make sure he's got that sort of equipment around. Obviously with everything else in terms of like I say with the soundtrack, and there's like superimposed little cigarette burns in the corner of the. If anyone's seen Fight Club, you'll know exactly what that is.
But it was quite funny. Again, it's another David Fincher film, isn't it? But they used to do that when back in the days that cinemas actually showed films on reels of film.
Yeah.
For anybody who doesn't know, a film would generally come on 3 or 4 reels of 35mm print film, or whatever millimetre print film it would be on.
And then you get your little spot in the top right hand corner when it's time to change the reel.
And it'd let the projectionist know that there's X amount of time before they need to put the next reel on to make sure that it runs seamlessly.
Yeah.
And obviously that was put in superficially, and you could tell that some of the grain had been adjusted to look. And then there's a scene where Mank and another character are driving driving down a desert road,
Yeah.
and you could tell that rather than actually tracking them, filming, in a car, which they could do now, pulling them on a trailer or whatever.
Yeah, they've got like the screen in the background.
Yeah, like the rolling back projection sort of thing, and it was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I hope that's not green screen. Like, I really want that to be like a proper like film reel going off in the back.
It felt like it, didn't it? I mean, it could well be green screen, and I get the impression that David Fincher wouldn't have sort of skimped on the budget with this, and I imagine that's probably why it's gone to Netflix, because obviously they financed The Irishman, which was Scorsese's latest effort, and he was trying to get that film made at major studios for I think like the last 20 years, and nobody'd entertain it, and then obviously Netflix has become the phenomenon that it is, and that they obviously financed it, and there was some serious money spent on that film. And again, another one I've actually still to watch.
Have you not seen The Irishman?
No, I held out because being a physical media collector like I am, I knew that it was coming to the Criterion collection, and I really just felt like the first time I experienced that film, I wanted it to be on a Criterion Blu-ray, and to experience the full sort of, it's on a Blu-ray. So it's it's a 1080p transfer from the 4K master rather than the 4K stream that you get on Netflix. But I suppose with bit rates and things like that, it'll just about probably be somewhere in the same ballpark. Anyway, that's a topic
for another time.
For another time, another podcast.
Yeah, we can discuss whether that one. We're gonna have this thing where so when we're doing film reviews, it's either gonna go into the museum. Mm-hmm. Or it's going to be lost to history.
Absolutely. So you probably noticed that our title, if you're a real movie buff, is a throwaway line from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And, Indy, Henry, follow me. Lost in his own museum, huh? Yeah. And so absolutely.
He speaks a dozen languages. He'll just slip away and disappear. You'll never see him again.
What was all that you said about Marcus? He'll blend in, disappear. Oh, Dad, you know that he got lost in his own museum.
Love that line, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's where the name of the podcast comes from.
Because we're both absolute fanatics for that.
Yeah.
And
Indiana Jones.
Yeah, I love in that film as well. That's possibly my favourite film of all time. It's certainly up there.
It's definitely one of mine,
Indy and the Last Crusade. And I love the father-son dynamic in that. And it kind of brings me back onto Mank, because this film was written by Jack Fincher, who is David Fincher's late father. Now, I'm not entirely sure when it was written, because I didn't look it up. But written pre the 1990s. I'm sure it's the 70s from reading about, like, when the film was announced and stuff like that. I'm sure it's it's around that sort of time period. And David Fincher wanted to make this film after he'd made The Game in 1997.
Yeah.
And Game was only his third feature film. He'd done Alien 3, which he disassociates himself from, and probably quite rightly so as well. There was a lot of studio interference, and really there's not much in there of David Fincher's direction and oversight. But his breakthrough film obviously being Seven.
Yeah.
And then
great film.
He followed that up with The Game, which is possibly my favourite Fincher film. And then he wanted to do this afterwards, and none of the studios had entertained it, and so it sort of got shelved.
Yeah.
And then obviously he's been able to do it with Netflix. But I just think it's absolutely brilliant that his dad, a great screenwriter, has written this film that's sat around for 40 years about a film and people that have been, dead for 80 years. And it's just absolutely a great collaboration and a real sort of nice tip of the hat to his old man, which I think is just brilliant.
It's interesting as well, because it's like it's interesting that they did it now. The sort of the technology is kind of there now, to realistically make it look like it was made in the 1940s. In the 1940s, and I don't think they would have been able to do that in the 70s.
No, probably not. Although it would have still. I mean, if you look at a lot of 70s films, they do now look very dated, don't they?
Yeah, but they wouldn't be able to like recreate that sort of 40s and 50s noir thing.
No, I suppose you're right. They wouldn't be able to.
That was a very clever segue, by the way, from Indiana Jones and his dad to that's very impressive. Nicely done.
Thank you very much.
Not
my first rodeo.
Jim here is Jim's also a YouTuber, under JT at the movies, so go and check that out.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I talk about movies, collecting physical media, reviewing, all sorts of things. Just movies in general is the name and the game of that channel. But it's really good. I know that they made a biopic about Mank before. I've not seen it. But I think in the late 90s, I can't remember for the life of me who was in it, but it's essentially the same sort of story. I don't think it focuses so much on the writing of Citizen Kane, just, his later years in Hollywood and how he sort of, burns some bridges and sort of how alcoholism gets the better of him. And
wrote a lot of films.
Yeah.
A lot of it. He's got about 97 IMDb credits, I think, for writing.
Yeah, he's an extensive body of work. Between
about 1925 and sort of 19...
Was this his last film? I think he said he never wrote for Hollywood again, didn't he?
No, I think he did a lot of... he did quite a lot of independent stuff after that. I was reading up before, his filmography ends at about 1948, 49, something like that.
And he died 55, didn't he? Mankiewicz, so yeah. And just a really, really great film. There was a scene where Gary Oldman, without spoiling anything, turns up at William Randolph Hearst's house, and obviously
drunk, and explains the story of
and he tells the story of Don Quixote, doesn't he? And sort of tries to modernise it for what the then modern times of 1940s, and it's basically this sort of it's a not even subtle dig at William Randolph Hearst, and just sort of the choices that he's made, and again it references all the different flashbacks, and there's sort of hints at he's definitely got affection for Marion, Randolph Hearst's mistress, as she referred to in the film. Even though he's happily married to his own wife, you can tell that there's definitely a real affection there, and I wouldn't say a romantic spark, but there's a real friendship between them, isn't there? A real solid bond. And he sort of turns up, and it sort of all culminates in this monologue. Gary Oldman was fantastic.
Awesome. It's one of the greatest scenes I've seen this year, at least. I would like to see Gary Oldman get nominated for an Oscar for this, because just with that scene alone, I think he's really earned one with that.
It was great, and there's not many things I look at off the bat and go, that deserves award recognition.
Yeah.
But
it was an extraordinary
like
piece of acting.
It was a really great film, really, really great film, and then it got to that scene, which is probably about 3/4 of the way in, and things are starting to resolve themselves, and we're starting to work our way back to the end of the narrative we start at the film's beginning. And he goes into that scene, and it was like but when he finished the monologue, me and Phil both turned to each other and just went, "Wow!"
Yeah, it was incredible.
It was absolutely just a great scene. And then I really liked that. Then there's a sort of an answer to that scene where Charles Dance sort of gives his rebuttal, and it's toned down a bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it sort of really just cements the relationship that these two chaps have now versus maybe where they were at the start of the film, and just sort of what factors have influenced that relationship. And it was really, really well done on both chaps' parts, but Gary Oldman blew it out the water.
Gary Oldman's incredible. I was really impressed with his performance in this. So Mank, definitely go in there. That one definitely belongs in the museum.
Absolutely.
I think.
I would say that it definitely wants to go in the museum.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to rate this out of 10, as me and Phil often do, where would you put it, sir?
I would go for a solid 8 with this one.
I think I would go for a solid 8 out of 10 as well. Mank is available to stream now on Netflix, and we highly recommend that you check it out.
Yeah, definitely. I also recommend that you check out Citizen Kane first, because you'll still really enjoy the movie, but I think it'll just it'll make more sense in context when you know the story of Citizen Kane, because there's a lot of sort of not digs to it, but just references to what then became Citizen Kane. With Mankiewicz talking about the character developments and stuff. Great performance, great direction, great writing, great soundtrack.
Just a really, really good, solid film, and really nice to see that. Obviously, after pretty much the movie industry and all industries really having to take a hiatus this year because of everything that's gone on. It was just really nice to get a really good, solid, well-made film. Well done to David Fincher.
Absolutely, yeah. And speaking of soundtracks, we asked the internet this week about everyone's favorite music related movies, which is a big thing for it's a big thing for both me and JT because we're both musicians.
We are.
We asked Twitter, what are your favorite music movies? We've got a good list here: Blues Brothers, Sound City, Searching for Sugar Man, Spinal Tap, Crossroads, The Great Rock and Roll Swindle, Pick of Destiny, Bohemian Rhapsody, Almost Famous, Pitch Perfect, Blues Brothers again, Spinal Tap again, Labyrinth, High Fidelity, which is sort of a music movie. It's about two guys who work in a record shop. So
yeah, well, the part of it's set in a record shop, but it's mostly John Cusack. He's with a girl. It's a long time since I've seen it, and interesting aside. The night I met my girlfriend, I actually watched this film.
Yeah.
But there you go. So it's a good long while since I've seen it. But yeah, it's a guy. He's with a girl. John Cusack's the lead. She breaks it off with him. He's desperate to win her back and wants to know why. So he starts tracking down all of his exes, who are all these very different women. Played by some fantastic actors. I think Catherine Zeta-Jones is one of them. For the life of me, I can't remember off the top of my head the rest of them. But he goes and sees these 4 or 5 different women and basically asks what was the breaking point. Why did they call it off with him, or what happened? And they all give him various insights into his character. And it's supposed to be one of those where the character sort of goes on a journey, learns a bit about something about themselves and all that sort of thing. And it's a very good film, but I'm not sure that the ending really sort of holds up on that. It's a brilliant ending in terms of we get to see Jack Black play with his band to launch the revamping of the record store or whatever's going on, and Jack Black is just awesome, isn't he? And,
yeah, definitely. He's awesome in everything.
Absolutely.
I've never seen High Fidelity.
It's definitely worth a watch, but I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are on the ending, because I think that the ending sort of, it kind of goes 90s cliche, but I think that that's the wrong ending.
Yeah, okay.
So I'd be interested to maybe pick that one up again.
Yeah.
But there's so many great music films though, isn't there? I mean, if you think about, like you said there, you've listed off Blues Brothers and Grease. And
Blues Brothers is one of my favourite films of all time.
Absolutely, it's in my
one of the
top
most
10
quotable movies ever as well.
It really is. Yeah. This don't look like no expressway to me.
What sort of music do you guys usually have here? Oh, we got both kinds, country and western.
Oh, Bob, this is the band.
We can literally just sit here and quote Blues Brothers all day. It's 106 miles to Chicago. Got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes. It's dark and we're wearing sunglasses.
Hit it. Oh, dearie.
There's some. What's your favourite music movie?
My favourite music movie. You mentioned it on that list actually.
Yeah.
And it's a documentary.
Okay.
And it's Searching for Sugar Man.
Yeah, everybody keeps telling me about this, and I still haven't seen it.
It is absolutely fantastic. Now, I came into awareness of this film from a chap who I don't know personally, but was a YouTuber that I used to watch, a guy called James Merchant. And about, 7-8 years ago, he was a fairly big name on the UK movie reviewing and collecting scene on YouTube. And he did an update. This is what I've watched and bought this month. And he saved this film until the end. And it's this documentary about a musician called Rodriguez.
He goes missing, doesn't he?
Yeah, and basically, Rodriguez cuts these 2 albums in the 70s. And, it's sort of got like a Bob Dylan, Byrds, Rolling Stones, sort of that kind of vibe, folky, bluesy rock sort of thing. And it does nothing in the States, and his producer he screws him over, and it just fades into obscurity. Unbeknownst to, nobody knows what happened to Rodriguez, and, like you say, he just disappears off the face of the earth. And unbeknownst to everybody, these albums become bigger than Elvis in South Africa.
Yeah.
And literally, these 2 chaps that own a record store made this entire documentary themselves. And I think it's filmed on like smartphones and things like that.
Yeah.
It's bloody fantastic.
People keep telling me about it. It's supposed to be really good.
We'll have to watch it and maybe talk about it for one of these episodes. But it sort of goes on, and these 2 chaps, they're interviewing the producers that did him over, and his old bandmates and all sorts. And it is literally their journey to America to try and track down this guy and find out what happened to him. Is he still alive? Is he dead?
Yeah.
And it brings you from the 1970s when he cut these albums right through to about 2010 or whatever.
Yeah.
And for anybody who's not seen it, and obviously including Phil,
No,
I won't say what happens, but it is one of the best music films I have ever seen. I would literally rate that, sort of 9 out of 10 and recommend it to anybody.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to give that a watch. People keep telling me how good it is, and it's one of those that's been on my list for ages, but I just never really got around to it. So,
I loved as well, like sort of what you were talking, sort of maybe like biopics and things like that. But Bo Rap was great.
Bo Rap's amazing,
and I really liked Rocket Man. I only saw that for the first time a couple of months ago.
Yeah, Rocket Man was done in a really interesting way because it was sort of. Like, I was worried to begin with because I'm not the biggest fan of musicals, of like as in sort of Broadway style. And me and my girlfriend were watching it, and it's when he's a kid and he starts singing one of his songs, and they use that like his lyrics to sort of signify what's going on in the situation, if you like. And
it's Saturday Night's Alright for Fighting, isn't it? And
that's like a great scene.
He does his first gig in a bar, doesn't he? And it's like, they're getting late and I'm gonna see my mates, and they're all dancing in the street. Like, it's very, very much like a stage show, isn't it? Rather than something like Bo Rap, which is a contemporary to it, sort of where they just, again, that's like fly on the wall type thing. You're watching it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting that like the way that film sort of came into being as well. I was reading about it that Elton John had met Taron Egerton on the set of Kingsman 2. And previously people have been asking him for years about doing a biography movie, and just never found the right person for the role, and then met Taron Egerton, and this is the guy, it has to be this guy. And when they finally got around to making it, and
he was incredibly impressive. He was
good.
Really, really good. I mean, the guy's got some serious acting chops. I've not seen Kingsman 2 yet, but I've seen Kingsman 1 and really, really liked it.
Kingsman 2 is great.
I've seen Eddie the Eagle as well, which is daft. But again, he's good in it. And those are the only two things from memory I think I've seen him in. But definitely a good actor. Yeah. But yeah, he absolutely blew me away in Rocket Man. I thought it was just a really, really great film.
Yeah.
And just a really, like you said, interesting sort of stylistic choice for them to sort of do it like a musical rather than a biopic, although it is a biopic.
It's interesting that it did so well as well, because coming off the back of Bohemian Rhapsody, it was because it almost competing with each other considering like the time when it came out, and because Bo Rap was such a massive deal, it was such a huge film, and obviously Rami Malek won an Oscar for it. They got nominated for quite a few Oscars, and
it cleaned up, didn't it? Did Bo Rap? I think at most of the awards ceremonies, like Golden Globes, BAFTAs as well, and but yeah, do you know what I really liked about Rocket Man was the fact that Taron Egerton actually did the vocals.
Yeah.
Now it's probably
quite rare for a biopic.
Well, it is, isn't it? It's probably, I think, did Jamie Foxx do it for Ray Charles as well, for Ray?
Yes, I think so. I'll have to look that up, but yeah,
I'm sure he did. That's a good one as well.
Have you seen Ray?
Yeah, it's a fantastic film.
That's a really good film.
It really is. But with Rocket Man, I thought it was really impressive. It's probably still a difficult thing to do and a real challenge, but probably easier to impersonate Elton John than it is Freddie Mercury.
Oh yeah, I would think so. Definitely.
But obviously they used Fred's real voice from isolated vocal tracks, and then I think amongst others there's a chap that's on YouTube called Mark Martell, or McTell, is it?
He does like a
but he's
impersonator.
Yeah, he sings in the style of Freddie, doesn't he? And I think the Queen have their own sort of like their own tribute show that they send out touring. So I think it's the Queen Extravaganza. I think he fronts that as well.
Yeah.
And I think he did a lot of the like sort of where Freddie sits at the piano and maybe sings like a rough version of Bo Rap, or he does Love of My Life, doesn't he? And cuts the demo in the barn studio. And I think that's that Mark chap doing it, and just brilliant. I would love to see. And for anybody who knows me, they know what's coming. But I would love to see a Fleetwood Mac biopic.
I would absolutely love to see a Fleetwood Mac biopic. But isn't it Stevie Nicks that's been really awkward about it and doesn't want anybody to do it?
I think she's sort of saying that she would have to have creative control.
Yeah, which would be disastrous, I would think. No
well,
offense,
I don't know. I would imagine that Mick Fleetwood and Lindsey Buckingham wouldn't come off lightly in that.
I wouldn't have thought so.
But no, I think it would be great. Can you imagine though the sort of, because what the way I'd do it is I'd sort of do like the Fleetwood Mac are the struggling blues band after Pete Green's gone.
Yeah.
And they obviously had for anybody who knows the band, had the Wilderness years where they went through singers like nobody's business. And guitarists. And, they had some really... Well, Fleetwood Mac is just one revolving door of lineup changes, isn't it?
Yeah, more or less.
But,
it just revolves around Mick Fleetwood and John McVie.
Pretty much, yeah. And I always loved... I think it was David Spade that referred to the lineup that was in the 90s as Mick and John, and then 2 contest winners.
Pretty much.
That's brilliant. But yeah,
it sounds like a Family Guy joke, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
No,
and
was that there was one about Carrie Underwood. She must be good. She won a job in a contest. Like
she is actually fantastic. Is Carrie Underwood though? Brilliant voice and great songwriter. Yeah. But yeah, I'd do the whole them. They're a struggling band. They find Lindsay and Stevie, and then it's just like it's probably a bit like Bo Rap did with they have the guy at the beginning, don't they? And he's like, no, I'm going solo, and then they find Fred. And I'd probably run it up to them reuniting for the dance in the mid-90s.
It'll be a bit more than I'm going solo. It'll be I'm going off to do some acid with some German people for the next 30 years of my life.
Bless him. And but yeah, I would love to see that film.
Yeah, I would. I've been thinking about it for a while. I think it would be really interesting.
Yeah, I think the Eagles would be quite good as well. There's a fantastic music documentary, a history of the Eagles on them, and it's a completely uncensored look at them. It's like 5 hours long is this thing.
Yeah.
And all Eagles members, past and present, get their chance to be interviewed, and there's not a lot of love lost between those chaps, and that's quite an interesting watch as well.
Yeah. One of my favourites was Straight Outta Compton.
Oh, that was so good!
Brilliant film. There's a director's cut as well, which I've got shows a lot more sort of into Dr. Dre's life. I mean, I've never I am quite a hip hop fan, but I've never been a big fan of NWA, because I kind of preferred the things that I preferred the way that the rap genre went after NWA. You had people like Tupac Shakur and Snoop Dogg and people like that coming out. That's more my thing, but obviously it's important as a rap fan to know the sort of history with it. But the extended edition is a lot more about the sort of ins and outs of Dr. Dre's life, about him, his first sort of meeting with Jimmy Iovine when they decided to dismantle Ruthless Records, and Jimmy Iovine's kind of a bit of a hero of mine. That's actually another really good documentary on Netflix at the moment.
You mentioned that the other week, about his documentary. There's loads of folk interviewed on that, isn't there?
The Defiant ones. Yeah, it's pretty much anybody who's ever had anything to do with Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre. Yeah, you'd Stevie Nicks and Tom Petty and people like that are all in there. The one really important scene in the NWA one, I don't know why they didn't show it in the cinematic cut, was the car chase that Dr. Dre got sent to prison for a little while. Basically speeding through LA in a Ferrari at 110, and he describes it in the documentary as well, and in the Defiant ones, saying just being in this really angry place and get behind the wheel of a Ferrari, I'm doing 110, see a police car behind me, so I just speed up and keep going, and then suddenly another 2 police cars appear out of nowhere. Now I'm in a high speed chase, and he's just talking about it like it's totally
so
normal.
Matter of fact, yeah.
And so the police chased him through LA for about 10 minutes or something, and pulled him over, and he was reporting to jail every week. Which it's interesting because after watching the Defiant ones and then going into the biopic, about the amount of stuff that they missed, about how kind of difficult it must have been for NWA at the time.
Yeah.
But that's definitely one of my favourite music biopics. So watched the Motley Crue one as well the other day.
Oh, see, I haven't seen that yet. Is it on Prime or Netflix?
That's on Netflix, The Dirt. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's based on
I've heard fantastic things about that,
It's awesome. Again, I'm not a huge fan of Motley Crue. Yeah, the film itself is amazing. it's basically just about how Motley Crue started and how they became this kind of this powerhouse of like crazy typical rock and roll lifestyle, and how they became sort of famous for it, and they do like a lot of interviews with the real band at the end, and Tommy Lee's like on a motorbike, and there's this van, it must be in a van I think, that's going like driving alongside him with the camera out, and talking to Tommy Lee while he's riding this Harley Davidson down the street. Oh yeah, so I was just running through the corridors of this hotel totally naked, and like I remember just banging on this random door, and this old woman came out, and I screamed at her, and then just kept running. I just heard her on the phone to the police saying there's a young man with long black hair running around a hotel room completely naked, setting things on fire. And yeah, it takes you through the kind of the stuff that their manager had to put up with them trashing hotel rooms and having these ridiculous parties and going on stage out of their minds on a massive cocktail of various horrific Class A drugs.
Oh, that sounds pretty good, to be fair. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of Motley Crue, but I again love a good music biopic. Interesting point you make there, though, about how there's so much history, and with all these bands and singers and musicians that they make these films about, there's always something that's gonna be missed out, and somebody's always gonna be like, oh, they didn't tell that story, and that's why I think sometimes stuff like Blues Brothers, even though it's a comedy, and
obviously like fiction rather than like
sort of, it's because then there isn't anything else. Did you ever catch what's it called now? Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story?
I haven't seen that one. No, that's supposed to be amazing.
It's fantastic. So it is a complete send off of pretty much every biopic, music biopic done from like the 80s through to about the time when Walk the Line came out. The Johnny Cash one again, another fantastic film. Such a good film, and it mostly is. Dewey Cox is Johnny Cash with a little bit of Buddy Holly and a little bit of Bob Dylan thrown in, and it takes you on this story, and all the scenes are rip-offs from a Beatles, one of the Beatles movies, like I can't remember whether it's Yellow Submarine or Hard Day's Night, and then there's the famous clips of the Beatles in India, and they do that, and then there's the Bob Dylan bit where he's got the sunglasses on and the turtleneck, and he's doing Hey Mr. Tambourine Man on a picket line somewhere, and the famous scene in Walk the Line where the studio execs are not into what Johnny Cash is doing, and he plays the really somber, heartfelt version of Folsom Prison Blues.
Oh yeah, I think I've seen that scene.
And and he when you watch Joaquin in that scene, he's almost sort of tearing up singing it, because you can see the guy's thinking he's losing his chance. But then when they do the send off of it in Walk Hard, he plays a song called Walk Hard, which is it could be a Johnny Cash song. Yeah. And for a comedy film, like, they wrote these great songs, and some of them have got innuendo. There's one in particular called Let's Duet, which is him and his future wife, which is pretty much just June Carter Cash.
Yeah.
And they're singing together, and it's again a send off for something like Jackson, or one of the great duets that they did, and the writers went really hard on it. Like, some of these songs could hold up as, like, if you put them on an album, and they're in a comedy film.
Was he not one of those musicians that famously went on tour with a piss take?
I'm not too sure whether they toured it or not, but
that was like, because it just kind of puts me in mind of what Spinal Tap did.
Yeah, it's in the same ballpark as Spinal Tap.
Yeah, I love Spinal Tap.
Or Blues Brothers, again, bringing it back to the classic, obviously fronted by Belushi and Aykroyd, who could sing, but then all those guys behind them are rhythm and blues greats of the 60s and the 70s. Like you've got Booker T and the MGs, their rhythm section, I think, is the rhythm section of the Blues Brothers.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, because they all turned up on SNL as well.
Yeah, well, it started as an SNL sketch, didn't it?
Yeah, like before the movie, which I've never seen. I've never seen any of the sketches.
They're quite funny, and a lot of the stuff that they talk about in the film, like pre him going to Joliet, is the sketches.
Oh, okay.
And like, obviously the song Soul Man gets famously associated with them.
Yeah.
They do Soul Man on SNL.
So like the Blues Brothers is like a like a sequel to everything that happened on SNL.
Yeah.
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 That I did not know. I'll have to watch those. Because I love the Blues Brothers.
Yeah, it's so good. What do you think of the sequel?
It was alright. I think if you look at it as like a tribute to John Belushi, rather than a film, you know, like an in memoriam thing, if you like.
Yeah.
Then it holds up, but it's a tricky one because it's like. Because it's pretty bad. It's nice to see everybody again. You know, it's nice to see the band again. Aretha Franklin's turning up in it again. You know,
pretty much everybody who's still alive at that point.
Yeah, more
comes
or less.
back, don't they?
Yeah.
I think Ray Charles was the only living cast member that didn't come back, but bless him, he'd have been, you know, in his advanced years, so understandable that he didn't. Yeah. I don't mind it. I saw Blues Brothers 2000 before I saw Blues Brothers.
Oh really?
Yeah, and so obviously going back and then seeing the original secondary was brilliant then, because it was just like, oh my god, you know, if I loved that one, then that one, you know, the original blew my mind.
Yeah.
I always love how obviously John Goodman does a pretty good job as the stand-in for Joliet Jake, doesn't they? And they do that number, I'm looking for the fox in the club. Yeah. And it's sort of like the dawning, you know, sort of moment where Elwood realises actually maybe there's something in getting the band back together.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. It's not as good. It's actually quite weak in parts, but it's a nice tip of the hat getting the band back together, sort of a thing.
Yeah, I mean the original Blues Brothers is just incredible. It's one of my possibly my favourite film of all time.
It's certainly in my top 10.
Yeah,
and like you say, it's so quotable, and the music's so lovable. It's such a broad topic, because obviously it's a genre of film, isn't it? It's not like a franchise or.
Is there any of those that you think would get lost to history, or are they all belong in the museum there?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of any that are like, oh my god, that was.
Not that we've talked about. Have you seen any really bad ones? Do you think? I'm trying to think if I have.
Well, it's fiction and it's based on the cartoon from the 70s, but Josie and the Pussycats want to write home about. You know, with is it Tara Reid and Rosario Dawson, who's now playing Ahsoka on Mandalorian, isn't she?
So that's going to be interesting.
But we're both Star Wars nerds as well.
Yes, very much so.
Absolutely love Star Wars. And I'm sure there must be some really bad ones. But I'm just trying to.
I've never seen Almost Famous. That's supposed to be.
Likewise, I've never seen Almost Famous. I've seen I've seen like the memes and things like that, and I know that the song Tiny Dancer plays a big part of it.
Yeah.
But no, it'd be an interesting one to come back to that. Whether there are any bad music films.
We'll watch a few through the week and we'll let you know.
Absolutely, yeah.
We'll come back and talk about it again. We should probably have a segment of just like talking about really crap films, because we only ever really talk about stuff that we really like. It's like skimming across like films that we weren't too keen on.
Well, then put you on the spot for first episode madness. The worst film you have ever seen.
Yeah, let us know.
Absolutely. Go on, Phil. What's yours off the top of your head? If you had to think.
The worst film I've ever seen. I think the David Niven James Bond was like that. Just scarred me. Like it was.
Yeah,
it was absolutely awful.
Some backstory behind that. Me and Phil are idiots, and
it's a great way to start it.
Absolutely.
I might call the episode that.
Anyway, not to flog a dead horse. Me and Phil are idiots, and we like to. Phil's only actually just recently moved back to Yorkshire, where I live and where he went to university.
You're living in sunny Surrey.
He has indeed, and. So while Phil's been living down south, once maybe twice a year we'll get together at somebody's house, and because we're huge movie nerds, we like to do stupid movie marathon challenges, and we've done our fair share of them over the years. If anybody who's listening to this has seen my YouTube channel, if you go back far enough, there's some very dated vlogs on there. But the first one we ever did was to celebrate the 50th anniversary of James Bond and the release of Skyfall. And we watched all, I think it was 26 at the time, James Bond films. So the 23 up to Skyfall, And then there's a black and white Casino Royale made by an American TV show called Climax. There's Never Say Never Again, and then there's the aforementioned David Niven Casino Royale. And we watched them over 3.5 days and barely stopped for sleep to get them all in, which was lunacy. And
the David Niven one's just bizarre.
It's so bad. But it was like 3 a.m. when we watched it. And I just remember us sort of like trying not to fall asleep, but being enticed by this utter nonsense.
Yeah.
The one line that sticks out with me, because I remember it killing us both, was somebody tries to shoot Peter Sellers in it, and you know, when the gun goes off, and then this really just sort of sad voice goes, "This gun fires backwards, and I've just killed myself." And I just remember it breaking both of us, that line.
Again, it sounds like a Family Guy quote.
Yeah. Links quite nicely back into talking about Mank as well, because Orson Welles plays Le Chiffre in it.
Yes, I forgot about that. Yeah, that was really weird.
Yeah, it was a film sort of later on in his career, was that.
Quite strange. Woody Allen turns up in it as well.
Yeah, he plays Jimmy Bond, James Bond's nephew, and he's got the whole usual sort of like, oh, I'm Woody Allen, and like sort of, you know, the sort of just typical sort of like, you can see where the caricatures of him sort of come from.
A really nerdy, weird guy.
And it is possibly it was the worst James Bond film, definitely.
Oh, without doubt. And that's against some stiff competition.
It is.
I mean, A View to a Kill.
Do you know what, folks? I might have to leave. I have a soft spot for View to a Kill, and this is something that me and Phil sorely disagree on.
You know, film's bad when even Christopher Walken can't save it.
Oh, it is bad. Roger Moore, though, it's like, do you remember the Simpsons episode? I think it might even be the movie, actually, where Kent Brockman can't get access to his his Botox or whatever, and like his face droops on TV, so he just gets it on and puts it in a bobble behind his head. Roger Moore looks like he's done that. He looks like he's been stretched, and it's
there's loads of him hiding behind his head,
and it's like he can't even do the eyebrow lift anymore because they're just stuck in place in like permanent surprise. Like, hello, it's almost George Takei.
I love how because it's almost George. Hello.
I meant the impression, not how Roger Moore looks in the film. I just clarify.
Oh my!
Yeah. Do you know? I think the worst film I've ever seen is possibly Ghost Rider 2 with Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, that's a pretty rough one.
I fell asleep in the cinema with that, and then I thought I'm a Nick Cage fan. I'm not a Nick Cage apologist.
There is a difference.
But I am a Nick Cage fan, and. I bought the DVD because I felt that I owed it its due, to give it, because for whatever reason I'd fallen asleep and I thought maybe I'd had a long day and shouldn't have gone to the cinema and all that. Yeah. No, it was just a bad film, and that is definitely the worst film I've ever seen.
Yeah, there's a few on my. Catwoman was pretty rough.
Oh God, that's dire.
Did you see? One of the funniest things I've ever seen was Halle Berry's. Golden Raspberry Award acceptance speech, because like for anybody who doesn't know what the Golden Raspberry Awards, the Razzies are it's an achievement in failure in filmmaking.
Yeah.
So it's all films that are so bad, they get awards for like worst performance and she got worst actress.
And traditionally they don't turn up to accept the awards. It's like held in without them.
Usually they don't, but she'd been nominated for worst actress and. I forget her name. It's the actress that she plays. She's the voice of Lois in Family Guy.
Oh goodness me, Alex Borstein.
Alex Borstein. She turns up on stage with Halle Berry because she was in the and she's been nominated for worst supporting actress as well.
Yeah, she plays like a flatmate or something, doesn't she? And a co-worker. Yeah.
So they both turn up on stage at the same time, and you've got Halle Berry giving it the thank you so much. I'd like to thank my my manager and my agents for putting me in a piece of shit movie.
It's absolutely brilliant. That is such a missed opportunity.
They always at the Razzies as well. They always play the worst scene, like the most cringy, and it's the bit with the crazy cat lady that plays Neil Patrick Harris's mum in How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah,
and. When Halle Berry picks up this ball of something off the floor and starts rubbing it on her face, and she picks it up and very dramatically goes, "Catnip." It's horrible. It's like It's,
I remember when that came out, and I'd have been about 10 when that came out, and I grew up with Batman Returns.
Yeah.
And even the 60s Batman show, grew up with that, and because that's just, it's meant to be bad, and it's really camp, and it's just, it's played for laughs.
I didn't need to say I was Batman, I just turned up and people knew I was Batman.
I don't need vulcanized rubber. That's grade A West. But yeah, you grow up with Batman Returns, and, Michelle Pfeiffer, I Am Catwoman, Hear Me Roar, and possibly the quintessential performance of Catwoman. And that's no disrespect to Anne Hathaway, who was fantastic.
She was brilliant in Rises.
But I will be interested to see what Zoe Kravitz does as well. In the next one. But Michelle Pfeiffer is Catwoman, and then they announced this film, and I'm like, ooh! And Halle Berry had just done James Bond and had seen Die Another Day, and obviously, being a kid and not having any taste, I liked that film.
Yeah, I did when I was a kid. I didn't know any better.
And I was like, yeah, this is great. And I remember Dad renting it from Blockbusters for us and sitting down to watch it.
Yeah.
And, it was just like, what on earth?
What is this?
Yeah. What fresh hell is this? And it was just, And when we did one of our movie marathons a few years ago, we did one where you had to pick categories.
And one of them was a flop on it, so
we went with that one, and that's the most recent I've seen it, and it was so bad, isn't it? So bad.
It is awful. Well, that one can be lost to history, I think.
Ah, definitely that can be
unless that's an achievement of being so bad.
No. See, I think something like The Room,
yeah,
is one that needs to be, needs to go in the museum.
Yeah.
Just for being such a bad movie that it's brilliant. Have you ever seen it?
No.
We're gonna have to watch it. It deserves an episode of its own as that. So we'll park the discussion on The Room there. But we are watching that, and it's going to have to be an episode of this because it's just. And for Ruben, if you're listening, we're going to have to drag you into that one, mate.
Yeah.
Because definitely need to have you experience that.
I'll tell you what, just one more before we go to another segment. We're just talking about worst films. I mean, I don't really think of it as a film because it doesn't feel like a film. It feels like a really crap hour and a half YouTube video with some CGI in it, some 90s Game Boy CGI as well. But Jurassic Shark was just I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever seen it. Go out and find it because it's worth seeing just to get out of the way, so you know that it doesn't exist without you knowing about it.
Yeah, I'm a movie collector, as I've mentioned, and I still buy lots and lots of films. Yeah. But I went through a phase when I was, sort of in my early 20s, where I wanted a really huge collection, and so if anything even slightly piqued my curiosity, I'd buy it.
Yeah.
And I bought that one because the cover art of the DVD relatively reasonable. I love a good shark movie. It was sort of advertising that it was a shark movie in the vein of Jurassic Park. Anyway, we did a Jurassic Park marathon probably about 18 months ago.
Yeah.
And we decided to tack that on the end of it just as a post-credit sort of thing for the vlog. Anyway, it was
wish I hadn't.
So bad. It was so bad. And my cousin was with me when I bought that.
Yeah.
I probably had that DVD in my collection 10 years or more. And every so often, I get a text from our Jess going, have you watched Jurassic Shark yet? And for years, the joke's been, no, but I will get round to it. Anyway, she texted me not so long since. I forgot to tell her when we did actually watch it. And then she texted me not so long since over the course of the pandemic and went, well, you've a lot more free time now. Have you watched Jurassic Shark yet? And I'm like, actually, yes. And then I sent her on WhatsApp the mini 30-second review of it that me and you did, which I think is summarised by you going, I've just been violated.
I think, that's exactly how I felt at the time.
She found that very funny. I think it's on YouTube. What I'd say is watch it on YouTube, and definitely just be prepared to be appalled.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we do some questions?
I think we should. Yeah, we put out on Twitter, or our marketing department of Phil put out on Twitter.
our social media manager, right? Have you had any?
I haven't. I think the only question I got was the one that our fellow band member, Mr. McDade, sent us on a post that we were tagged in.
Okay, so I have that here. So Ruben, who is in a band with me and JT called Leaving Overmorrow, also has his own podcast with his brother called Going Jack, which is a reference to Jack from The Shining.
Absolutely.
Which
all
is
work and no play makes Ruben a dull boy.
Going Jack's a fantastic podcast.
It really is great. Yeah, check it out.
Those two guys are really funny. They're like, both know loads about movies. They have some really good guests on it. We're probably gonna guest on it at some point.
Absolutely.
As well. And Ruben says, if you had to choose one Bond out of them all to have done all the movies, who would it be and why?
Why are you putting so much emphasis on the H?
Cool Whip.
You're eating hair. So I'll let you answer that one first.
Right. Now, I've given this a bit of thought. I don't think Pierce Brosnan got a fair shot as Bond.
No, he definitely didn't.
And I'd like to give it to him because, GoldenEye was amazing. Pierce Brosnan was an incredibly good Bond, and to me, because like that was the era when I sort of first got into James Bond films. But yeah, like Pierce Brosnan never really got a fair shot as Bond. I think he had two good films, one brilliant film, and then Tomorrow Never Dies, which was pretty decent.
I prefer that to GoldenEye, but only just.
Yeah.
Only just.
Okay.
I think if they made Tomorrow Never Dies now.
Yeah.
Complete aside this, but if they made Tomorrow Never Dies now, I think it would be received absolutely phenomenally, given the whole climate of the media and social media and what it's become.
Yeah, I think so.
A villain orchestrating fake news.
Yeah.
Would be really.
I think that would go down quite well.
It would be really timely, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it probably still could do that. I mean, it's not like it's the first time.
But no.
A villain of that sort of magnitude.
No, absolutely not.
Novel, you know.
I think it's a good shout because you're quite right. Brosnan didn't really get a fair deal because GoldenEye's written for Dalton.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to come out in 91 with Dalton, and then all the legal stuff happened, and they didn't get that resolved until late 94. And so they ring Dalton up and go, right, we're ready to go on GoldenEye, are you good to go? And he's like, yeah, absolutely, but this will be my last one. I'm doing a trilogy, and then I'm bowing out. It's time for a new Bond. It's the 90s, rah, rah, rah.
Yeah.
Gracefully bowing out. So the Broccoli family that have produced the Bond films from Dr. No onwards basically turned around and said, well, we can't have you do that. We need you to basically commit to being Bond for the rest of the 90s because we need to get this franchise back on track.
Yeah.
And so Dalton basically opted out of his contract. So Brosnan gets brought back in after already losing out the role to Dalton the first time round because of the Remington Steele thing.
Yeah.
So he really has had this whole bad luck with it sort of thing. And then Tomorrow Never Dies, I think is a great film and I think he gets to do his own. But then for me, World Is Not Enough, and especially Die Another Day.
Yeah.
World Is Not Enough is boring. That's that problem for me. Is I just don't find it compelling.
Yeah,
but
I do enjoy
Day
Robert
is just
Carlyle as a villain, but Die Another Day was just awful.
It's just awful.
Yeah. Just cheesy nonsense.
And the fact that he was going to get Casino Royale, and then they decided to switch it up. And I mean, hindsight and everything, I'm grateful they did because Craig's been fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah. So it makes a compelling argument. I know it wouldn't be George Lazenby for me. I really wish he'd done Diamonds Are Forever. And maybe just done a bit like Dalton and done a 1-2 punch and had a great self-contained little back-to-back story or whatever. But again, a debate for another time. It's a cliched and probably obvious answer. But for me, I'm going to have to say Connery.
Yeah.
And he's not my favourite Bond, Sir Sean. But he's the one that everybody goes back to.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And every time they bring in a new Bond, you know, be it George, be it Roger, Timothy, who's my favourite Bond, Pierce, and then obviously now Daniel, and whoever they pick next, they always cite, you know, well, yeah, there's a bit of this, and I'm going to bring my own thing to it, but Sean Connery was, you know, the one. And so really, much as I think it would be a shame not to have had, like the Roger Moore and the Dalton ones, which I do love for, you know, various different reasons, possibly more so than some of the Connery ones, I think it'd have to be Connery. And the film that I'd use to back this up to say that he could still do it would be The Rock.
Yeah, yeah.
because in The Rock, for anybody who hasn't seen it, Alcatraz is obviously now a tourist attraction, and a rogue military unit decide to take it hostage to extort the US government, and they're gonna put poison gas, explode it over San Francisco and kill everybody if they don't get what they want. So the military, rather than have that happen, decide they're gonna send in a SEAL team and need the only prisoner who's ever escaped from Alcatraz, and that's Sean Connery's character. He plays Sergeant Mason in it, and essentially the character is in all but name James Bond.
Yeah, more or less.
And he's literally retired from the Secret Service and all that sort of stuff, and he's spent all his life in US prisons because of a job gone wrong in the 60s.
Yeah.
And it's it just, I always sort of liked the theories with that one, because I'm not normally one to delve into like sort of
in like fan theories.
Yeah, and sort of I always liked that one. That is that James Bond 30 years later.
Yeah.
And that for me shows that Connery could have done all the films, at least up to Tomorrow Never Dies.
Yeah, I think so. I think he could have done a lot more than he did. I would have what I would have liked to have seen happen, would be like a spin-off movie where you've got like set in the same universe with the same MI6 and everything, where Sean Connery there's like a new 007 or like a new 00 agent or a new whatever system they put in place to replace O's and like new technological age of espionage, and then seeing Sean Connery come back as James Bond as like an older character that sort of accidentally comes across this young spy somewhere, and he's living in like a cabin in the woods somewhere or something in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, do you know why that's funny?
Because it's basically the Bourne Legacy.
No.
Why?
Because it's the plot of the David Niven Casino Royale.
I know it is. But it could have been done better.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, that's a really good shout. Is that like sort of Connery taking over the M position?
Yeah, that would have been interesting. Yeah.
And
Ralph Fiennes.
Oh, he
Ralph
knocked
Fiennes
it out
was
with a
born for that, man. Like,
I'm scared with what they're gonna do in No Time to Die.
Yeah, same.
I don't know, but I have a feeling they're gonna make him the bad guy.
Yeah.
Because do you remember the Sony leaks when Spectre happened, and we all found out that Blofeld was in it long before the film came out?
Yeah.
It's like, no, he's Oberhauser.
They put him in the trailer with
the scar
and everything.
Yeah.
Which was like, set. It was a scene right at the end after it'd been blown up. And it's like, sorry, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it. But
it's been nearly 6 years.
If you haven't seen either the film or any of the trailers, that spoiled the entire film anyway. But like that being said, I remember watching Inglourious Bastards, and seeing Christoph Waltz in that, and thinking, do you know what? If they are going to do Blofeld again, like if they're going to do a Spectre type story in any of the new Bond movies, that's the guy. Like, that's who I'd want to do it.
He has the potential to be so good.
Yeah. And
I think he was just given poor writing. I mean, the whole spoiled older brother thing.
Yeah, that was awful.
Just absolutely dire.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the Sony leaks, they were gonna have Ralph Fiennes turn out to be, the character that Andrew Scott ends up becoming, the like sort of chief of staff or whatever.
Yeah.
That ends up being the double agent. They put that character in because it was originally written for Ralph Fiennes, but it got spoiled.
Okay.
So I wonder whether or not, if that's their overall intention with him.
Yeah, it could be.
To do that. But then again, there doesn't seem to be anybody in this film that they've brought in that would be a replacement for him. And I don't know. We'll have to see. No Time to Die comes to cinemas at some point in 2045.
Yeah.
And
hope for the best.
Just in time for the 80th anniversary of the franchise or whatever.
Go away, COVID.
Absolutely. Good news about the vaccine, though, eh?
Yeah, definitely.
And hopefully onwards and upwards, and maybe 3 months, 6 months time, we might be telling a different tale.
Yeah. So we've got one more question.
Absolutely.
Which was from. Bear with me just a second. That was from somebody on Twitter.
An intern's getting fired for this.
This is a question from Nandan on Twitter. What was your favourite film score?
Oh.
Here we go. There's suspense.
The cogs are turning. I'm thinking. I'm like humming scores in my head.
Sometimes a character will speak in exposition to move the plot forward.
They will also play a moving piece of music to evoke emotion.
Musically depict what's happening on the screen.
It's really difficult, is that? Danny Elfman's Batman score.
That's a good score.
Strikes a real chord with me because I've loved it since I were a young boy, since my dad, very inappropriately at the age of 5, let me watch the Batman film where the penguin bites a guy's nose off. And,
Yeah, I think I've got to see that one as well.
Yeah.
I was far too young to see Danny.
Absolutely, Danny DeVito making all kinds of sexual innuendo towards Michelle Pfeiffer in a skin-tight suit. And,
it does get downright disturbing, that movie. The penguin funeral is just bizarre.
Yeah.
That's the most Tim Burton thing I've ever seen. I can't believe I watched that at like 7 years old and didn't have nightmares, man. Like,
it's amazing, isn't it, when you sort of add context to the horror sort of thing, sort of like, oh well, it's the penguin, so it just all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, cool.
And the penguin slide him into the water.
Yeah,
oh, no.
Absolutely. But that score and like in particular the do 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 do.
Yeah.
And that that's great.
That was a saxophone, by the way.
It was. Saxophone.
Yeah, I'm gonna edit it later on and put like a theremin in the background.
But there's also stuff like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
That's a great score.
John Williams. Just John Williams in general is fantastic. You've got Star Wars, E.T., Jaws, Jurassic Park, Indy, Harry Potter. The list goes on, doesn't it? And in particular the Raiders March, and I think the version of it at the end of Last Crusade, we've already riffed the scene Lost in His Own Museum, our what we're titled after.
That's like my favourite little motif. That's the right word.
That is the right word. But you've got like the
classical music student.
And I am just not.
Sorry.
But then you've got the bit at the beginning with the circus chase, and you've got the and then the
I need to get us a piano for an
Yes, we are in a vocal harmony group, and it's just us going. Can you bring that up here a bit? But yeah,
it's basically that episode of Family Guy where Cleveland and Quagmire and Peter.
Don't bring me into this, Peter.
Shut up, Cleveland.
But yeah, so John Williams' music, in particular, The Last Crusade, I think is brilliant.
Yeah.
My all-time favourite composer is not a controversial choice, but maybe an unpopular one. Is the late Michael Kamen.
Oh yeah.
He did Lethal Weapon, did Die Hard, he did Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and basically all the great movies of the late 80s, early 90s before he passed on.
Yeah, everything that wasn't done by Danny Elfman.
And yeah, he does a lot of them, and you can really tell his score. When he does a score, because there's a lot of like flamenco guitar in there, and like the orchestral stuff's really sort of like really sharp and shrill, and like the gun barrel on License to Kill. Is the first one in the series to deviate from the traditional sort of Bond music that comes on, and it sort of just pounces at you, and that's brilliant. The co-write that he did with Bryan Adams. Everything I do it for you. Fantastic song. Mm-hmm. Spent several weeks at the chart, and it's used as the theme. But there's so many. There's like Jerry Goldsmith, and there's James Horner, Newton Howard, Hans Zimmer. There's just so many.
James Horner's a bit of a favourite of mine. I think the score from Enemy at the Gates is one of my favourites. This just because it's so kind of it's got that sort of that Soviet Russian influence in it, which is really interesting. Like tonally, it's very kind of there's a lot of like Phrygian sort of scales used, and it's really it's quite technical and just eerie. It's a really kind of, and there's motifs of it used in Avatar, which I noticed.
Did he come back to score Avatar?
Yes, he did.
Because they famously, Horner and Cameron famously didn't get on Aliens, didn't they?
Yeah.
And he's like, I'll never work with him again. And then Cameron said the same. And then he brought him back for Titanic.
Yes.
Which is actually another fantastic score.
That's a really good score.
Really moving music in Titanic as well. Sort of like the... that's the sort of like the single female voice, sort of like oohing and ahhing the Heart Will Go On theme, and variations thereof throughout the movie is really actually just really quite emotive. Yeah. And if that film had a different score, I don't think
different film.
I'm gonna say I don't think some of the scenes towards the end and some of the the love scenes and the obviously. Not having room for Jack on the thing on the floating door.
There was room on the floating door, Ruben. You know over this.
I didn't know you two had had that discussion, but there you go,
officer.
Yeah.
I think my favorite film score composer in terms of like all the work, like in terms of just sort of drama added to the films and stuff to really bring out the sort of emotion in the visuals would be James Horner. But that being said, I've got two definite favourite scores. I don't know if the first one counts because it started off as a cartoon and then went live action. But Henry Mancini's theme from the Pink Panther.
Did it start off as the cartoon though? I'm pretty sure, and I'll happily do some sort of a forfeit in the next episode if I'm wrong.
Okay. But, here we go.
But I'm pretty sure that Pink Panther and A Shot in the Dark came out first, and then they turned the...
Okay.
And then they took the Pink Panther and made it into the cartoon.
I shall find out. And we'll leave it down to you, the listener, to decide what the forfeit's going to be, which will be fun.
Be gentle.
Well, am I going to do it if I'm wrong?
I don't know.
Alright, so I'll do it if I'm wrong, and JT will do it if he's wrong. That one, and it's just Jurassic Park. It's got to be Jurassic Park. Like, I'm not a huge John Williams nut, sort of in general. I think he is an incredible composer, but Star Wars, E.T., Jurassic Park, Indiana Jones, maybe Jaws. That's about it for me with.
Yeah, I think he's done so many good things. I can't forget John Barry as well for all his work with 007 that we've talked about extensively here. But no, Williams is one of those ones. I'm in exactly the same boat with you as that. Is you cannot deny the man's talent. He is a master of his craft. In fact, if there's a level above master, or even a level above that, that's where John Williams is.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
But he's not my favourite.
Yeah, same. That's about where I'm at. Yeah, it's like the Shawshank Redemption of music composers, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's like you know that it's the best movie ever made, but
it's not your
favourite. Not my favourite movie.
Yeah,
it's a very good movie, and I love it. But
no, it is. I think I'd probably put it maybe like 7 or 8 in my top 10. But I do recognise that, to all intents and purposes, that is probably the best movie ever made.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we've been talking for an hour and 15 minutes.
Never. Absolutely fantastic.
So we thought we were probably going to do about 3/4 of an hour on this one, but
turns out we've done more.
So if anybody's got any questions or any more, we're going to have like a topic for each one. What we're probably going to do for each episode is we're going to review a movie. So we'll watch something throughout the next couple of weeks. We're planning on doing it once a fortnight, so once every 2 weeks. For those of you who don't know what a fortnight is, America. Hi.
Where do you alienate an audience, pal?
I love you, America. You're amazing. Seriously, no, I do. I love you. We're going to do it every 2 weeks. And what we're probably going to do is review a film. We'll have a chat about a genre. We'll pick something, or not necessarily a genre, but just like
maybe a topic
of films. Yeah,
we've talked before about maybe sort of like you look at your likes of like Michael Caine and your Morgan Freemans, and obviously Kirk Douglas is obviously he's just passed away, but then like Jack Nicholson, Michael Douglas, and actors that were big in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. and that now they're the like the elder statesmen, as it were, of cinema.
Ah, yeah.
And we talked about who's if we look at the 2010s,
next sort of generation,
who are we going to be looking at in 40 years' time?
Yeah.
That is this generation's Michael Caine, this generation's Morgan Freeman, this that sort of thing.
Should we talk about that next week?
We could do, yeah.
Let's do that next week.
Absolutely. Well, there you go.
Next time.
But next time, yeah. We've decided the topic there. That was easy, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But
so we'll pose a question to you on social media about that one. I'm at Twig Says on Twitter.
And I'm at JT at the movies.
So we'll also be doing that on Facebook for our Facebook listeners. Hi.
Absolutely.
Probably stick it on Instagram as well. And yeah, we'll start a little thread about that and see what everybody comes up with.
Absolutely.
Be consulting you all.
Absolutely. With this one being the first one as well, folks. Any feedback, any suggestions that you've got, just be open and honest with us. Unless you're going to tell us that we're shit, in which case we don't want to hear. But no, in all seriousness, let us know what do you guys want out of the podcast, because it's as important to us as what we want out of it is that. And let's recap, Phil. So we've talked about Mank. Is that going in the museum?
That is definitely going in the museum.
Absolutely.
I think most of what we've talked about tonight is going in the museum.
Yeah.
The only ones that I think are being lost to history are going to be Catwoman, David Niven, James Bond. Did we mention? I would say A View to a Kill's lost to history. I would like to see that one lost.
I have a soft spot for that film. Well, there you go. That was the first episode of Lost in His Own Museum.
Yeah, so we have no idea how to end a podcast.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to use my same catchphrase that I use on my radio show, which is remain indoors and have a pleasant apocalypse.
Take care.
See you later.